Hey guys, and this will be my final review before I go away for a week. For a week and a half to be more precise. But I was able to watch Tetris and I will be able to provide this review for you because the movie was awesome, yes. Now it's solidified that I really am sad that I didn't put it on my most anticipated list because this movie is really awesome. Then again, I didn't really know that it was coming out, so yeah, that's also why I haven't put it. But again, the movie is awesome, addicting, keeps you on the edge of your seat, and I had a really great time watching it. For starters, I will say that there are lots of things to say about the movie actually. If you love video games like I do, which you probably should know by now, then it's definitely a movie for you. And if you're a fan of political thrillers, then it's also certainly a movie for you. Yeah, because this movie talks a lot about history of video games in their very early days, but also in many ways, it's also very much a political thriller that contrasts capitalism of the United States and communism in the Soviet Union. Yeah, very much so, because the story is that the story is about this guy, Hank Rogers, who wants to secure the right to Tetris so the game could be released worldwide. But because the game has actually initially been created in the Soviet Union, it's a really, really hard thing to do because the Soviet Union doesn't want to release the game worldwide. They want to only have the game in the Soviet Union and nowhere else. So yes, as a result, I already said it and will say it again, the game is both very much about the history and the making of a video game, full of many video game references, but also very much a political thriller. And I loved it so much, and it works perfectly. And there are so many things to love in the movie. Like, for example, I love the cinematography in the movie. I don't always pay attention to cinematography, but here I thought it was just perfect. Like, everywhere in the world, in America and Japan. Yeah, because Hank Rogers lives in Japan with his Japanese wife and kids. Like in Japan and the United States, the color palette is so colorful, but once in the Soviet Union, the color palette is kind of grayish actually. And I loved it so much. It perfectly reflects the atmosphere of the Soviet Union and of the United States. United States full of freedom, and then the Soviet Union that's very much a dictatorship and doesn't even allow people to release their work of art to the public and make money from it. Another thing I love is that many things, when they're happening in the movie actually uses like pixels of the old video games from these days. That's right. So, from time to time, a real life screen literally turns into like the screen you'd expect from the video games, and the characters turn into small video game pixels, video games from the 80s. And yeah, this is really cool, wicked creative, and it perfectly, very much further reinforces that the movie is very much about a video game. And the movie even has some cool twists that you will not see coming. Yeah, but though I will not spoil them here. And another thing I'll talk about is that the performances simply are great, especially Edgerton, who plays Hank Rogers. Yeah, like Tom Edgerton is simply fantastic in the role, and he does such a good job of portraying Hank Rogers. And the ending of the movie is like heartwarming, great, and even though it was kind of predictable, it's still very much like a great ending, and it totally does justice to the movie. And so yeah. And finally, the final thing I'll talk about is my history with Tetris a bit. I mean, at this point it's kind of beside the topic, but since the movie is about Tetris, and it's pretty much as addicting as the game, if not more so, I gotta tell a bit of my history in the Tetris. I remember how I got this Game Boy Advance cartridge. Yeah, I got this Game Boy Advance cartridge. I still have it actually. Wait. Yeah, I still have it, even though it sadly doesn't work anymore. but yes, I still have it, though it doesn't work anymore. And it had many of the old NES games actually, or Atari games, or like very old games that you wouldn't be able to find back then. Nowadays everything can be emulated, so it's much easier now to get many of the old games, but back then it was much harder. And I remember how this cartridge had so many of those NES games emulated, and Atari, and Tetris was among them, and it was very addicting. And then I played it again when I went to college in the United States, because we had something called Game Room, and that's where we had like 2 arcade machines. Although the college said there are some cool arcade games, we only had 2, and Tetris was actually one of them. The other one was Pac-Man, and yeah, and in both cases it was kind of an addicting game. Tetris is not my go-to play game, especially now when you have incredible games like the one I just reviewed, Metroid Prime, From Software, The Witcher, Assassin's Creed, Castlevania. When you have so many masterpieces, then it's really hard to just now really just love Tetris. But this movie really showed how back then Tetris was a gigantic thing, and it was wicked awesome to also look how people perceived video games differently back then. And even though, as I said, Tetris is not really my go-to play video game, once you do play it, it's still pretty addicting. Okay guys, so this is my review of Tetris. Great movie, it much better than either Shazam! Fury of the Gods or John Wick Chapter 4. Much better than either one of those 2 movies. And they were still great movies, keep that in mind. But this is so much better than any of them. So yeah, Tetris, I love Tetris. So, okay guys, so please subscribe this channel, and as I said, I'm going away for like a week and a half, so I will not be around, but don't worry, I will be back in like a week and a half. Talk to you then, bye!